The dust swirled like a devil's whisper across the parched plains of Montana Territory, where the sun beat down merciless as an outlaw's gaze. Widow Eliza Thorne stood alone on her porch, her calloused hands gripping a hammer that felt heavier than her husband's coffin had been 6 months prior. The neighbors had whispered then, too, poor Eliza, left with nothing but a ramshackle cabin and a plot of land too stubborn to yield. But now, as she drove the first nail into the fresh-cut timber, their whispers turned to outright laughter echoing from the distant ranches. What in God's name was she doing, encircling her tiny home with a shed that wrapped around it like a noose? It was madness, they said, the folly of a woman broken by grief. Little did they know, the shed hid a secret that would turn their mockery to terror, and the dry firewood was just the beginning of a nightmare buried beneath the boards. Eliza's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the horizon where thunderheads gathered like vengeful spirits. The rainy season was coming, the kind that turned the earth to mud and drowned hopes in flash floods. Her husband, Jed, had died in one such storm, dragged away by a raging creek while fetching supplies from town. Or so the story went. But Eliza knew better. She'd seen the boot prints that didn't match his, the signs of a struggle hidden under the water's fury. Murder, plain and simple, though the sheriff called it an accident and pocketed whatever bribe kept his mouth shut. Now, with Jed gone, the vultures circled, not just the birds, but the men from the neighboring spreads, hungry for her land and whatever else they could claim. It started small. A plank here, a beam there. Eliza worked from dawn till dusk, her skirts hitched up, sweat carving rivers down her dust-caked face. The shed grew like a living thing, enclosing the cabin's walls inch by inch. Old man Hargrove, from the ranch to the east, rode by one morning on his swaybacked mare, his belly shaking with chuckles. "Eliza, darlin', you fixin' to build a fortress? Afraid the Injun's gonna come knockin'?" His words carried on the wind, drawing snickers from his hired hands trailing behind. She didn't answer, just swung her hammer harder, the thud echoing like a heartbeat in the silence. By the end of the first week, the structure was halfway around, a wooden embrace that blocked the view from the south. Widow McAllister, the gossip queen of the valley, clucked her tongue from her wagon as she passed. Poor thing's lost her mind. A shed all around? What's next, roof in, over the whole damn prairie? The laughter spread like wildfire at the next town meeting, where folks gathered at the saloon to swap tales. "Maybe she's hidin' a lover," one cowboy jested, slapping his knee. "Or buryin' treasure from that no-good Jed." But Eliza kept building, her muscles aching, her resolve steel-forged. She knew what they didn't, the shed wasn't for protection from rain or raiders. It was a trap, baited with the promise of dry wood, and the real storm was brewing underground. Nights were the worst. Alone in the cabin, Eliza would lie awake, listening to the coyotes howl and the wind rattle the unfinished boards. She'd found the first clue while digging post holes. A glint of metal buried deep, not rust but shine, like a vein of gold in the dirt. Her spade had struck something hard, and when she pried it free, it was a strongbox, locked tight with a keyhole that mocked her curiosity. Jed had never mentioned it, but the engravings on the lid spoke of secrets, a serpent coiled around a cross, the mark of the Blackwater Gang, outlaws who terrorized the territory years back before vanishing like smoke. Rumors said they'd hidden their haul somewhere in these hills, a fortune in stolen gold from the stagecoach runs. Had Jed known? Was that why he'd been killed? She buried the box again, deeper, and continued building. The shed's walls rose higher, now encircling 3 sides, with space between the cabin and the new structure wide enough for a man to walk, or hide. Eliza stacked firewood in the gaps, cords upon cords, dry and ready for winter. But that was the ruse. Beneath the piles, she'd dug tunnels, shallow but cunning, leading to hidden compartments where she stored her real preparations, a loaded Winchester, vials of something far deadlier than bullets, and maps she'd sketched from memory of the gang's old haunts. Word spread to the saloon in Bitter Creek, where roughnecks nursed their whiskeys and plotted their claims. Silas Crow, the meanest of the bunch, with a scar twisting his lip into a perpetual sneer, overheard the tales. Widow Thorne's gone loco, he drawled to his cronies, a band of drifters with eyes like hungry wolves. Buildin' a shed round her place. Sounds like she's hidin' somethin' worth stealin'. Silas had his suspicions. He'd ridden with the Blackwater gang in his youth, before they double-crossed him and left him for dead. He knew about the lost gold, had dreamed of it for years. If Jed Thorne had found it, then Eliza might be sitting on a fortune. And with her alone out there, well, accidents happened in the West. The laughter peaked when Eliza completed the fourth side, the shed now a complete ring around the cabin, like a moat of wood. Doors at intervals allowed access, but from afar, it looked absurd, a house within a house. The neighbors gathered one Sunday after church, a posse of pity disguised as concern. "Eliza, honey," Widow McAllister cooed, her voice dripping false sweetness, "this ain't right. Let us help tear it down afore the rains come and rot it all." Hargrove nodded, his mustache twitching. "It's a eyesore, woman. And dangerous, could collapse on ya." But Eliza just smiled, a thin, knowing curve of her lips. "It'll keep the firewood dry," she said simply, and turned away, leaving them to their guffaws. That night, the first rain fell, a gentle patter that grew to a roar. Lightning cracked the sky, illuminating the shed silhouette like a beast crouching in the dark. Inside, Eliza waited, her lantern low, ears straining. She knew they'd come, the curious, the greedy. And sure enough, hoofbeats approached, muffled by the mud. Silas Crow and his men, 5 shadows slipping through the storm, drawn by whispers of gold and the widow's strange construction. They tied their horses at the tree lean, creeping close. "Look at that fool thing," one whispered, stifling a laugh. "Shed all around, easy pickins." Silas hushed him, his eyes gleaming. "Split up. Check the woodpiles, might be hidin' spots." They fanned out, prying at the boards, rain soaking their coats. One man, a burly brute named Tate, shoved aside a stack of firewood, revealing a loose panel. "Hey, boss, there's a hole here." Eliza's heart pounded as she watched from a slit in the cabin wall. The trap was set. Tate crawled in, greedy hands groping in the dark tunnel. But as he advanced, a click echoed, a tripwire snapped, and the ground gave way beneath him. He plummeted into a pit she'd dug, stakes sharpened from broken fence posts impaling him with a sickening thud. His scream pierced the night, shocking and raw, cut short by gurgling blood. The others froze, horror dawning. "What the hell?" Silas barked, drawing his revolver. But Eliza was ready. From hidden slots in the shed's walls, she fired the Winchester, the shot exploding like thunder. One man dropped, clutching his gut, his blood mixing with the rain. Panic erupted. The remaining 3 bolted for cover, but the shed was a labyrinth now, doors locked from inside, paths leading to dead ends she'd designed. Lightning flashed again, revealing the true horror. The shed wasn't just wood, it was fortified with barbed wire woven through the beams, traps sprung by careless steps. Another man triggered a snare, a loop of rope yanking him upside down, dangling like bait as Eliza emerged from the cabin door, her face a mask of vengeance. "You killed Jed," she hissed, her voice cutting through the storm. "For the gold he found. But it's mine now, and so are your lives." Silas whirled, firing wildly. A bullet grazed her arm, burning like fire, but she didn't flinch. She'd laced the vials with poison from the apothecary in town, a slow-acting venom meant for rats but deadly for men. Earlier, she'd coated the door handles, the wood piles, anything they'd touch. One by one, they faltered, clutching throats as the toxin burned through their veins. The last man standing was Silas, cornered against the shed's wall, rain washing blood from his hands. "How'd you know?" he gasped, eyes wide with shock. Eliza stepped closer, the Winchester steady. "Jed left clues. The box, the maps. And your boot print by the creek, same as the one I found tonight. She pulled the trigger, the blast echoing across the plains, his body crumpling into the mud. Dawn broke clear, the storm passed, the shed standing unbroken, firewood stacks miraculously dry under overhanging eaves she'd cleverly angled. The neighbors arrived later, drawn by the gunfire rumors. They found the bodies, twisted in agony, and Eliza nursing her wound, her story spilling out, intruders, self-defense. But as they buried the dead, whispers turned to awe. The shed had saved her, they said, kept everything dry, including her secrets. But that was only the surface. Deep beneath, in a chamber she'd excavated, the Blackwater gold glittered, enough to buy the valley twice over. Eliza smiled inwardly, the laughter was gone, replaced by fear. And in the quiet nights that followed, she wondered who else might come knocking, drawn by the legend of the widow's fortress. The days blurred into weeks, the shed becoming a landmark of sorts. Travelers passing through Bitter Creek heard the tale, embellished with each telling. The widow who built a wall of wood and turned it into a death trap. Eliza tended her land, planting corn where the blood had soaked the soil, as if to erase the violence. But the ghosts lingered. At night, she'd hear scratches at the boards, whispers in the wind, imagination, perhaps, or the restless spirits of those she'd dispatched. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in blood-red hues, a stranger rode up. Tall, cloaked in shadow, his hat pulled low. "Ma'am," he said, voice smooth as snake oil, "heard about your invention. Mind if I take a look?" Eliza's hand tightened on the porch rail. He dismounted, eyes scanning the shed with too much interest. "Keeps the wood dry, they say." She nodded, inviting him closer with a gesture that hid her caution. As he inspected the walls, fingering the seams, she saw the tattoo on his wrist, the serpent and cross. Another Blackwater remnant. Her pulse quickened. "Careful," she warned, "it's sturdier than it looks." He chuckled, a low rumble. "Oh, I bet. Jed always said you were clever." The name dropped like a stone in still water, rippling shock through her. "You knew my husband. Partners, once. He double-crossed us, hid the gold here. Figured you'd lead me to it eventually with this spectacle." He drew a knife, gleaming in the twilight, advancing with predatory grace. Eliza backed toward the cabin, her mind racing. The shed was her ally. She ducked through a door, slamming it shut, the lock clicking. He pounded, cursing, then circled, searching for entry. But she'd anticipated this. A hidden lever inside released a cascade, logs tumbling from an overhead bin, crashing down like judgment. He dodged, but not fast enough, one struck his leg with a crack of bone. Limping, he fired through the wood, splinters flying. Eliza rolled aside, grabbing a lantern. She hurled it at a prepared spot, oil-soaked rags igniting in a whoosh of flame. The fire raced along a fuse she'd laid, leading to powder kegs buried strategically. The explosion rocked the earth, the shed section collapsing in an inferno, engulfing the stranger in screams and smoke. Neighbors came running again, buckets in hand, but the fire was contained, her design ensured it burned only the intruder, the rest standing firm. "Arsonist," she claimed, tears feigned. "Tried to burn me out." They believed her, the widow's luck holding. Yet the gold called to more. Word of the blasts and bodies reached farther, drawing bounty hunters and fortune seekers. Eliza fortified further, adding false walls, poison darts triggered by pressure plates. The shed evolved, a living fortress of deception. One night, a pair of brothers snuck in, whispering of maps they'd stolen from Silas's effects. They tripped a wire, arrows, fashioned from Jed's old hunting gear. Whistling through the dark, pinning them like butterflies. The shocks mounted. Eliza discovered Jed's journal hidden in the strongbox, revealing he'd been Blackwater's leader, not the victim she'd thought. The murder. A rival's revenge. Her world shattered, the man she'd loved was a monster. But the gold was real, and with it, power. She used a portion to buy silence from the sheriff, turning the tables. Suspense built as winter neared, snow threatening to bury the secrets. A final challenger arrived, a woman, veiled and mysterious, claiming to be Jed's sister. He left it for family, she said, eyes cold. But Eliza saw the lie, the gang mark faint on her neck. The confrontation unfolded in the shed's maze, a cat and mouse of shadows and surprises. The woman sprang a trap of her own, a hidden blade, but Eliza was faster, her grief-fueled rage ending it with a shot that echoed eternally. In the end, the neighbors stopped laughing, stopped visiting. The widow's shed stood as a warning, firewood ever dry, hiding horrors beneath. Eliza sat alone, gold her only companion, wondering if the next storm would bring rain, or blood. The West was wild, but she was wilder, her story a legend of shock and survival, whispered in saloons for generations.